Okay, here we are at the Nomad Market on Tuesday. It's a twice-a-week market, and you can see a range of food here along the benches, but it's nowhere near as much as it was before. And this is really an interesting kind of reflection of the local cash and exchange economy. With the airstrip being largely closed with the ruts on the runway, planes haven't really been landing very often, and many of the government workers have left. So there's just like 3 school teachers who are not from here, and no police, and no real government officers here. And they were the ones that would pay regular money wages that help stimulate the local economy. So the market kind of is a reflection of the state of the general economy. And in comparison with other times I've here, this market is really doesn't have a whole lot. I mean, you can see there are, you've got bananas, and you've got some okari nuts, and other kinds of foods, greens, various kinds. But when I was here in 1998, you had like 4 or 5 times as much food and a much more active economy of exchange going on. Most of these piles are standard price, so usually like 20 toya, which is like a dime. So like one of those piles of okari nuts, delicious okari nuts, would be like a dime, or bunches of bananas would be a dime. And even at that, they really can't sell very much because people don't have much money. So the economy here really is dependent largely on the airstrip and outside things coming in and people with wages. And when that's down and the airstrip doesn't function much and the government people have left, the local economy really goes down. So people complain a lot about not really having clothes that aren't fully ripped up or other things that they feel that they really have come to depend on. And the market generally is kind of a reflection of that. You might remember actually in the Gebusi book on the chapter on that has the market on it, reflection of the market, how difficult it was to exchange a 2-kina note, and a ripple effect of all the exchanges that went on as people tried to put together change for that. And that market was hugely bustling, whereas here it's much more desultory. It still is an area that people from different ethnic groups, or what we otherwise call tribes, come together, and it's also a place that women can have a strong role. So the sellers along the bench are almost all women, which is important. So they bring the food in, but as I've mentioned in the book, often the food is not sold. Many of the food items that they've gone deep into the forest to get, collected carefully, brought all the way to the market, they won't have a chance to sell it. So in many cases, they'll just either give it away or take it back, and all that work will be really lost. So the investment in market is great because women and others want to get some coins, some money from exchange with local produce, but it's really tough because the cash that people have to spend on it is pretty low. So it is a center of social activity. It brings people together from different ethnic groups. It's a place that women can have a role in the local economy. It's a place there, a way station or a transition point between subsistence food and a cash economy, but it's pretty minimal by comparative standards, including in the past. So things are moving on in terms of globalization in the world generally, but some places are kind of left out, and this is one of them. Okay, thanks a lot. Here we are at the Nomad Subdistrict office, and this place is fairly remarkable for what's not here. When I've been here every time before, even in 2008, when the market and other economy was low, this place, especially on market day, which is today, on a Tuesday, this place would be bustling with people. There would be, the radio would be going, the officer would be there trying to communicate with the outside world, and you can see it's closed tight as a drum, and the closed door is kind of an interesting symbol of the whole thing. But there's no government officer here at all. The police quarters that were on the left here, the police office, is shut. There are no police, no constables. who were important for dispute settlement and also for other issues of law and order, so to speak, that is totally shut down. The government office on the right is also closed. There's no government officer here. And this office, since I was first here in the 1980s, was always the central hub of communication with the outside world, with development projects, with people interacting with the government, programs of various kinds, and now there's no one here. So it really is quite significant, both in real terms but also symbolically, of the fact that, as Gebusi said in 2008, the government here has kind of died. And as a result of that, people's connection and understanding and respect for the government has declined. They just see it as kind of a present absence. Many of the officers here still take their pay as government officers at Nomad, but because of the airstrip being closed, they say they can't really work here, so they live in Kyunga or another town and take their pay there. So the money budgeted for this office is still there by the government, but it simply isn't used actively on the ground here, and the officers who are paid, those who remain on the payroll, are not physically present. So it's kind of a sad indicator of the decline of government in outstation areas, and over time, the church and outside business development, corporations that are exploring for oil and so on, pick up the pieces of the infrastructure. And this is a common pattern in outstation areas in countries where the government either doesn't or can't get funds to local areas, that they depend increasingly on. So the church, the Catholic Church and others, and any money that they get from oil and gas or other compensation or business developments from outside multinational corporations, such as they are in some parts of the country, pick up the pieces that the government has left. So that's an important kind of development, in that the idea that health and education, welfare and government facilities kind of support the people is very hard to maintain in outstation areas, and has really declined since Papua New Guinea independence in 1975, progressively to the present time, where this government office is completely closed. Okay, here we are in front of one of the abandoned government houses. When the Australian Colonial Office established the post here these houses were probably originally built around the early 1970s. They set out a row of 2 sets of houses for the government officers. And when the post was still under Australian auspices, then the government officers would live in these. And there were a bunch of different officers and departments. And that got turned over to the Papua New Guinea government when the country became independent in 1975. Since then, there's been little maintenance of the houses, and you can see the results of their being abandoned, and really some of them pretty unlivable. On the other hand, you may be able to faintly hear some music in the background. This has become places where people that are associated vaguely with the government, or maybe squatters of a certain kind, or teachers, somehow make these structures still livable, so they're able to continue using them. But it is again symbolic of the fact that the government officers, even under Papua New Guinea governance, there were a range of departments here. There are different officials. There was a development officer, school teacher officer, the police, the government officer in charge, the deputy officer in charge, the radio operator, and many of those people were given these houses to live in. So this is kind of ground zero of the government staff community, as it were. And these houses now, some of them are closed up, a few of them are used casually, and the grass has grown up, and you can see it's become something relative to what it was before, a derelict area. And if you remember from the very first beginning of the Gebusi, in the little section on entry, I believe it's called, there's a line about the plane coming down. You can see the twin row of houses glinting in the sun as the plane circles, getting ready to land on the spine of the book you have yet to read. Well, these are those houses, which are really no longer glinting in the sun, insofar as the roofs are now rusted out and the buildings are falling into disrepair. So here we are on the Nomad airstrip, and this is surprisingly significant. You see these ruts in the ground, and this is the reason why the planes can't land or land only very infrequently, and the most important air service, the MAF service, will no longer land at Nomad at all. This is one of the oldest airstrips in the whole, and one of the, in principle, best, longest, flattest airstrips in the whole district. However, the grass is growing up, and you can see a little further, the grass is really growing up, and the grass, the soil has become so sedimented over time, it really should be hard, like a gravel surface for the plane to land on. And this area gets 12 feet of rain a year, and the planes skid when they land. And as mentioned in the Gebusi book on the return portion, and for 2008, if the plane skids to the point where it pitches forward and the propeller touches the ground on these single-engine planes, it can flip the whole plane and everybody crashes. So it's quite dangerous. And the basic closure, or almost virtual closure, of the Nomad airstrip has an enormous influence on the entire area, because government workers can't get in and out, pay can't come in, all the supplies. Now we have to walk several hours further away than ever before up to Honanabe in a different language group, even to get to Gebusi, because of the closure of this airstrip. And it's a tremendous amount of work to fix it, because it's a long airstrip and they've got to put gravel and grade it. And in principle, the government has money to do it. However, slippages, graft, inefficiencies, and other problems, the people are not willing to work for free to keep up such a big airstrip, because there's a tremendous amount of work, and the government in principle has money, but it's slippage between lip and cup. And so the airstrip is really falling into bad disrepair. And these ruts are kind of the end result, along with the grass. And one of the MAF planes that tried to get in, it got stuck. And it was very dangerous. And so they will not fly here anymore. There are a few services that will occasionally, but this airstrip was first built in 1963, and it was in continuous service up until the 2000s. And then since then, it's been open and closed, but now closed to regular traffic pretty much, except for some of the more adventurous charter companies which are willing to risk landing here, but that doesn't happen very often. So it's a real significant impact on the entire economy. Kind of shows how certain outside developments have a really big impact on local area as a ripple down effect through the entire community. So the local economy and the kind of desultory market and difficulty of people to get clothes and other things which they want is really strongly impacted by this rut right here. And it's in the center area of the whole district. So you see the rest of the Nomad government station around, and the rainforest in the distance.